Welcome to the Voice of Creativity podcast, brought to you by the International Advertising Association. I'm your host, Brennan White. On today's episode, we had the guest Nick Teare, who's the Executive Director of Client Services at RP3 Agency. Nick has such a background in our space. He has so much knowledge, it's hard to quantify. I'm going to have him on again. But I think the number one thing to note is Nick has been both at the pedigree agencies for a while and has helped build up some of the world's most iconic brands from the brand side. He has so many awesome stories to share. You're going to love it. He's a fun guy. It was a really great episode to have. If having people like Nick on a podcast is valuable to you, consider giving the podcast a subscribe and giving the video a thumbs up to support. We'd really appreciate it. Without further ado, here's Nick Teare. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brennan. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Excited to have you. In kind of preparing for this, I was really excited because you have this awesome history on both sides of the aisle or the divide, so to speak, on the agency side of the world and then the kind of prestigious, awesome brand side of the world over the years. And so I think that's probably, maybe not super rare, but I think that's extremely good to hear from people. And I think, especially on this podcast, you're the first one with that background. And just because you have such a good, over the years, such good experience, I think it'd be great for people to hear about that, even and up to like, especially for those getting into the space. Maybe at the end we can talk about, any advice you have or something. But maybe just to start, perhaps we just give everyone a little context on what you're doing professionally now, and what you focus on today, and we can work backwards.
Sure, that sounds great. I've actually kind of returned to my roots a little bit, which is back to a small agency, creatively focused shop where I do what I really love doing, which is working very closely, with clients and trying to help them solve their problems in unique ways. So I actually started my career helping someone found an agency. So it was he and I at the kitchen table.
Nice.
Two of us, and I'm back in a little bigger place now, but it's that same feel where again we're really focused on the work day to day, and it's great client relationship. So back to my roots, back to my passion.
That's cool. I like that. I didn't know you were at the kitchen table founding a company. You have that
Yeah,
entrepreneur angle too, then, and that's
that's
cool.
right. It's my career is has really come full circle. I was looking at some work out of Droga 5 in London, where they did a really cool remix of an old Diet Coke jingle. They call it Just Because now. It used to be Just for the Taste of It. And my second job was at a large New York agency where I worked on Diet Coke. So again, this whole full circle thing, I didn't think I'm over yet, but I'm seeing some signs here. So it's great to see, but I've lived long enough to be a nostalgia act, I think.
I was going to say, I
Yeah,
think in the music world, that's being remixed
that's
and
right.
sampled,
That's
right? Like
exactly it. Yeah, yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah,
That's so good.
yeah.
Well, it's better that than not being sampled at all,
And
right?
then
So
just like fading away. That's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
that's pretty cool. I didn't know about that. That's awesome. So the
I know.
current place, RP3
Hmm.
Agency, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, I was obviously doing a lot of research for it. It seemed like there's a message around doing good and finding the good in companies
Yeah.
and things like that. Is it you guys focus on companies with a mission and like, kind of like almost non-profity type companies, or is that just kind of like the way you look at the world?
It's the way we look at the world, but it's also the way we look at each other. And
That's
one
cool.
thing, having been around for a while on both client and agency sides, culture can sometimes get a little slippery, right? Where we don't always treat each other really well. We don't always treat each other really respectfully. And when you're in a creative environment, that becomes extremely, important. These people put heart and soul into their work, and we should, look at it that way. So whether it's each other, whether it's the creative brief, whether it's the client product, we're always trying to find what's best in there. And brand at its best is a notion that's been around, with a lot of agencies for a while now. but I love the extension of it to, again, to how we interact with each other and sort of some of the ground rules. It's a polite way of saying no a-holes, you know, one of my favorite one of
I
my
was gonna
favorite
say that.
agency slogans. And I just was at a conference the other day where an agency, was proud to have that. And that's always the first warning sign, where if you have to say it, you've got a problem, right? Um, but
Yeah.
the neat thing about RP3 is, we're not like a philanthropy agency or a cause agency, but we just happen to have a collection of clients that are doing wonderful things. Like Children's National Hospital here in Washington has got an amazing reputation, top 10 in the country, for saving kids' lives and helping them grow up stronger. It's the stories that come out of there every day will make you, weep with joy or weep with sadness. It's amazing. We work with Norfolk Southern, a freight railroad company, and you're like, freight railroad, when you get images of coal and smoke blowing out of the engine, Petticoat Junction type of stuff. But they are amazing when it comes to sustainability. And they can actually trace their sustainability roots back to like the early 1800s from predecessor rail companies, with this place called Brosnan Forest outside of Charleston, which is tens of thousands of acres that are just pristine. So, and then we work with an association who is trying to overcome vaccine hesitancy in underserved communities across the country. So, whether by design or we fell into it or we just gravitated towards these companies and organizations that see the good in their mission, it's a gratifying place.
Well, yeah, or maybe they're gravitating towards you guys. Maybe you guys are putting out some good energy
We'll
or something.
we'll take it either way, as long as we get paid handsomely for our efforts. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. The transportation rail comment is cool because I'm like one of my pet hobbies is I like read about renewable energy and
Hmm.
EVs and things like that. And one of the things I was most surprised to see, I mean, I guess in hindsight, maybe it's obvious, but just like it's super efficient to move things via rail. So even though I agree, the regular human reaction to hearing about rail is
Yeah.
like smoke coming out of the top of a
Yeah.
coal engine.
Yeah.
It's actually, you're moving so much, so efficiently that it's actually not a bad solution, even if it were producing some sort of emissions. But if
Yeah.
the company is not only a rail company but also actually trying to make it greener, that's actually probably one of the better things we could be doing, at least in the transportation world.
It's absolutely amazing. I wish I had the stat off the top of my head, but the thousands of miles that they can haul on 1 gallon of gas is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
they recycle every single railroad tie. They recycle all the steel rails. And when you think about the fact that they've got over 19,000 miles of track in the east coast of the U.S., it's an amazing story. This announcement was brought to you by Norfolk Southern Corporation, by the way.
You're good at what you do, let me tell you.
When
um,
you get great stories like that, and it's hard not to love talking about it.
Of course, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's I think the interesting part, right? Is like from the outside, you'll hear occasionally about someone else's campaign or something, but you really only hear the surface, and you never really dive deeper. So
Yep.
sometimes diving in is really cool, especially when like that. I happen to be a nerd for that thing, so that's cool. One of the other guests we had recently is Eitan Shapira, who's a MIT professor on creativity, which is
Hmm.
cool. And actually, his background, he's like an artist, but so I think the way he put it, he's like the only artist or only creative. I don't want to misquote him, but the only creative in the entire faculty or something like that. It's like he's not the exact uh, background you'd expect for an MIT professor, but he's really cool. And he said, interestingly enough, that the data is showing that around the world, uncertainty is increasing.
Hmm.
Just like the people's feelings of uncertainty about the future is increasing. And so that's making people more conservative and more fearful. And it's like changing the way they make decisions, right? They're less likely to take risks, less open to new ideas, things like that. And so I thought that was interesting because I just talked to him later, not that long ago. And then I was looking at what you guys do, and it seems like
Yeah.
you guys are actually well positioned for that world, right? If the world is getting scarier, or we think it is, maybe it's not, but if the perception is that the world is getting scarier, um, seems like you'd want your agency to be focused on the good stuff, right? And be actually spreading that message and kind of leading with that message out there to counterbalance. It seems like you guys are actually kind of perfectly positioned for today.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We're doing work, and we also have we're helping out a small startup on a social justice app. That basically, if you are part of the community and you're in a situation where you feel uncomfortable, with law enforcement or someone else, you alert the community, and they will come out and bear witness and help you out. So again, this is another thing that just we sort of bumped into, but it fits our profile really really well. So it's work that we just wanted to do. Absolutely.
That's
It's
cool. That's
it's an
another.
it's an interesting comment though that the Dr. Creativity made, because I totally hear and I can understand the reflex about going conservative. However, in my client side, that would have been the opportunity for me to be like, no, we're going to go the other way, and this is going to be the opportunity where we're really going to push it and try something that's a little bit out there. Go a little counter, to the thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what that was my instinct as well, was just
Yeah.
like, you guys are probably great to hear the good news all the time, but if the world was kind of Pollyanna and there was, rainbows everywhere, maybe it wouldn't resonate as well as now. It feels like it's like needed, more needed than before, which
Yeah,
is cool.
yeah, exactly right. And we actually had a client have us change the creative campaign to reflect just that.
That's
Children's
cool.
National Medical Center, where you can go potentially with that. You can go really like in a St. Jude's direction, if in showing sick kids and what the hospital, what the facility is doing to make them better, and that's amazing work that everybody should be behind. But in the context of last year and early this year, we went in a very different direction, which was we actually sort of told the story of the hospital through a couple of, kids who were acting like reporters and filing news stories about some of the new treatments that were going on. So it's very serious business on a day to day, but the feeling was, people need something a little bit different right now, and we'll probably go back and go back to the different tenor. But they were, I think, smart enough and brave enough to go against the tide a little bit.
That's cool. I love that.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think I want to give the listeners a little bit more context about what you do and maybe your background, but then I want
sure.
to get into things like,
Have I
you just kind
confused
of touch.
everyone already? Is that the issue? Yeah.
No, no, no.
Oh, okay,
You've
good.
done perfectly. I just think before we get into the things, I really want to
Yeah,
talk about like the pendulum swinging back and forth over the years, right? I think you just kind of touched on it. We'll
yeah,
probably head back the other way at some point, right? I think ultimately that's what, at least I haven't been around too long in the career, but seems like we go towards in-housing and then towards agencies, and we go towards
yeah,
friendly stuff and towards edgy stuff, and
yeah,
it just seems like there's almost a pendulum. And so I want to talk about that in a bit, but before we dive too deep in there, I'd
yeah.
love to, if you could go into a little bit about your role at RP3, just so everyone knows kind of what your day-to-day is like, and who you're working with and stuff like that. That would be awesome, and then we can continue.
Sure. The fancy highfalutin title is Executive Director of Client Services. So I'm overseeing our account management group, which we've renamed Account Leadership, because that's really what we expect of our account people. You shouldn't be just managing anything. You should actually be leading and helping the client get on the front foot, in terms of what they should be doing, and then also oversee the strategy practice, and then what we call connections practice, which is media and public relations. So those three, sort of the more client facing, parts of the organization.
That's awesome. And I like that. Yeah, I'm a big proponent. I think I annoy my team with that stuff all the time, but I'm a big proponent of little changes in words mattering a lot.
Words matter. That's absolutely right.
uh,
Yeah.
like even when you're trying to be disciplined about going to the gym or eating or whatever you're disciplined about, like saying I don't do that. I don't drink after 10 p.m. or on a weekday, whatever it is, versus I can't.
Yeah,
Right? One of them feels like you're withholding something awesome from yourself, and
that's
one
right.
feels like that is not what I do, right?
That's right.
And I
That's
think
right.
even just changing your internal monologue matters. So certainly, in a group of people, changing just one little word to leadership actually I think matters a lot, actually,
Yeah. No,
both for the clients and the team.
conference I was at just the other day, there was a whole, piece on that too. It's like they clearly don't work in a small agency based on what they expected their people to do, but the point was well taken in terms of, look, if you want to realize creative opportunities, if you want to grow revenue at your agency, you've got to get on the front foot. I mean, you can be successful and get high client satisfaction by sort of giving them what they ask for, but you're not going to get the respect, and you won't ultimately get the growth.
Awesome, I love that. And so what are if there are trends, maybe I understand each client has their own context and they're all unique, of course, but if it were possible to summarize some major trends that you're seeing, are there any things that the clients are asking about that is common across the clients? Are they, for example, I don't want to put an idea in your head
Yeah.
if this is not right, but like the pandemic, maybe that's still at the forefront. Maybe people are already past it. I don't know. But are there things that are kind of common across, even though they're, transportation and healthcare and various spaces?
Yeah, it really is about, everyone is, full on with we need to continue to build and burnish our brand, right? But they also need to see the connectivity to business results. And for, the hospital, that's all about driving interest engagement into their specialties and getting, setting up appointments and seeing the specialists at the hospital and things like that. That's definitely part of the remand. For the freight rail company, it's, how can, marketing really help drive demand, and how can specifically digital, drive demand in an environment that was mostly direct sales for years upon years. And so this is something where, social comes into the mix, content comes into the mix, and not how can we replace the direct sales team, but how can we sort of augment and fill in the spaces when they're not in front of their clients to feed their clients really intriguing, interesting information to help make those engagements that much more interesting, that much more profitable, things like that. I've got to put in a plug for another client, Giant Food Stores in this area, the supermarket chain, and it's all about local community, and that's how they're positioning and building their brand. But it's a retail client, so with a lot of perishable inventory in the store. So we've got to drive people in there. So it's this, mix of, it's making sure we're making the connections, or we're doing branded retail right in the right way, where we're doing both, and both feed each other. Brand drives people into the retail, and retail is enhances the brand. So more of that seems to be a very common thread across both. And then obviously, of course, keeping pace with the consumer. What are the latest insights? What are you seeing? And how do we stay ahead of it? Not just what's going on today, but where are we going to be in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? Because everyone's sort
Awesome.
of everyone, no one's got a long-term look right now. It's like summertime, September, type of thing.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Oh, that's awesome. So those are basically two macro trends. One is driving clear ROI and holding you guys to performance. And number two is diving into culture and the audience and understanding them better and predicting trends and things like that.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
saying
but
that it's fairly common across the customers, regardless of
yeah,
the industry and their use case.
absolutely. But not letting go with the brand. People still realize that that is the big differentiator. So it's not an instead of, it's an addition to.
That's awesome. I love that. And so are either of those things different now compared to 10, 15 years ago? I would imagine, like just take the past 10 years, we went from almost no social 10 years ago to social and very minimal mobile. to lots of mobile now, and all these whole swaths of, I'd say, like, not the industry, but there are whole swaths of just the human experience, the experience of the customer that didn't exist not that long ago, and that has all changed, fairly rapidly. As far as, if we zoom out, that was all in a 10, 15 year tight span. I would imagine that caused a lot of changes of focus and how the customers are asking what they're asking for. But maybe not. Maybe those things are consistent even across the decades. Do you have any, like, if you can think back that far? And I know everything's quite so
Yeah.
different. Maybe it's a hard question, but what has
It's not.
changed?
It's not, and I think it's sort of fundamentally it's still the same game, right? It's all about relevancy. It's all about adding value, to people's lives. It's just we've got an insanely greater, bigger toolbox to play with now, and in terms of the listening, the data, that can come back to us. So I think, the challenge now is not how do I, it's kind of how exactly do I do this, or what are my opportunities, to do this, and what can I, get back, and how quickly can I react. So everything, of course, is sped up, but I think still the fundamental challenge, I think, is still the same. It's just, how do I put my, access all colors on the palette here to make it all go.
Yeah, even over the past few years, I feel like, the number of channels, which to someone in our seat is like the
Yeah.
number of colors on the palette, right? The number that is maybe doubled in the past few years, right? And
Yeah.
then probably again 5 years before that. So I would wonder if, yeah, the mission's the same, certainly,
Mhm.
but is the complexity getting out of hand? um, or is it
It
always the
has
same?
has definitely outstripped, some of the clients that we deal with, even if it's a large organization, the comms team, can be relatively small. So the ability to sort of deal with it, and that's where, the pendulum on, in-house versus agency swings back in favor of the agency. We're just in a better, position to be able to stay on top of it. And when we, can really, sort of fine tune the approach with products like Cortex. Hopefully, we'll talk more about that in a minute.
Thank you.
That becomes, sort of a great leveler and the whack to the side of the head, in terms of like, look, this gives you a renewed focus on what you should be looking at. So yeah, it's beyond outstrip. So a lot of the conversations we have are about scale it back, let's be simple, let's do the things we can do really well. And then maybe, we're not going to be able to chase, TikTok, or anything like that for the next, 3 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that you use TikTok as the example, because that's my example too. That's the soup du jour that
Yeah.
a lot of people
It's,
ask
it's,
about.
it's the Snapchat of 2020 and 2021. Yeah.
It's exactly my
Yeah.
commentary. This is
Yeah.
the same conversation we had 2 years ago with
It's
Snapchat.
exactly the same conversation. Yeah.
And like, yeah, yeah, as we've
Sort of
seen,
reassuring
Snapchat
that it
has
keeps coming
matured.
back, like remixes on my career. But yeah.
Yeah, as long as you get good at having that conversation, like you just said,
Just got
let's
to find
focus on
my
what we're good
notes.
at.
Where are they? Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not chase every rabbit, shall we?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, yeah, because that is my sense that, even in the past 10 years or so, it's gotten more complex, but the mission's the same: connect with the audience, give them something compelling to believe in, highlight the best aspects of the brand or the company or the product.
Yeah,
That's
I,
awesome.
I, I think yeah, and I think the only thing that they may have changed in there is people's attention spans and patience is, getting shorter and shorter. And it's another maybe conversation for another day, but just that whole, interrupt versus entertain, conversation. I just, everyone's been saying don't interrupt, but then I just heard a great example the other day of a beautiful interruption, activation. That's like, wow, that'd be well worth it any day of the week.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm obviously, not obviously, but I'm very much on the entertain side. But I
Hmm.
completely agree. I think sometimes I'm too harsh. It's a mix, right?
Yeah.
we've proven over many decades that, putting something in the middle of a magazine article does work.
Hmm.
Or nowadays, of
Yeah,
course, it's more digital,
context is
but
everything, right? Yeah.
context is everything. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly right. So if you do agree with that pendulum swinging thing, which maybe you
Oh
could push
yeah.
back on if you disagree, but if you
No,
do agree, where are we? Are we on one side or the other? And which direction are we heading? At least in your
it's straight
experience.
down the middle right now. I think it's going back towards agency. Again, for a lot of the complexity issues, the in-house models. I don't know if they've been able to work over time. That's a lot of overhead, for companies to take on, and I saw that at my previous, employer, where they made a substantial investment, and when things were good, everything worked, pretty well. When things got a little leaner, the flexibility of the agency arrangements, started to come back and make more sense economically, from an economic sense, from an efficiency sense, and also from a get out of the echo chamber, sense in terms of ideas, that haven't been pinging around the building for however long.
That's having never worked inside at a big brand or company like that. I've never experienced that, so that's cool that you mentioned. If I could just drill down a little bit, when
Yeah,
you say ideas picking around the building, is that like we just have some or largely the same people for X number of years who largely believe the same kind of things, and so therefore we don't really have a fresh sense of turnover in terms of like
yeah,
intellectual ideas and concepts.
yeah, and also depending on the size of the organization, you literally have committees and layers of people who are, reining in their input and their feedback, and their ideas, and it just hards to be, again, trying to do things by committee, another age old saying, just proves to be, impossible. And that's when you end up, really playing it safe, with that type of thing. When 47 people say they want to do a viral video, you're really in trouble.
I want it to go viral.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
not? Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, I'd love to touch on that if we could talk
yeah,
where you were prior and perhaps
sure.
even before that, just so everyone has a sense of where you were and what you were working
Sure,
on then.
and they're directly related. It's all very incestuous. Um, for the previous 5 years before RP3, I was vice president of global brand marketing for two luxury hotels, Ritz-Carlton and St. Regis, as well as some of their sub-brands like Ritz-Carlton Reserve, which is their little boutique brand, about a handful of them around the world. Did some things with their yacht collection offering that came out. And before that, I was actually with the Ritz-Carlton's main agency, Team One, out of Los Angeles. They're part of the Saatchi Publicis empire, and an agency of about 300 or so that really focused on premium brands. So I got tied in with them many years ago, spent 10 years there, and then when there was an opportunity on the client side, I thought, wow, maybe instead of recommending things all day, I get to approve things all day. And so I jumped over, and that part came to be true. And I love that. That was just absolutely heaven. It's just like, oh, you mean we can go from, idea to in market in the space of a few days sometimes? 100%.
I think you just very succinctly encapsulated all the agency people's uh, feelings and desires and dreams. It's like, do you mean I could have a very similar job, but where where I just approve stuff instead of hustle and come up with all the ideas and have them jot down all
Well,
the
the price that you pay, like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, is you can't take the grail across the threshold. I mean, you've got to deal with like the internal stuff, on the client side, and you spend so much time, doing budgets and administrative things, and meeting about so many other things that you spend actually very little time um, on creative issues and with your agency.
fun stuff.
Yeah, and it is, and that's another reason why I went back, was because I still, for all its headaches and for all its stressors, all its angst, I still love the being on the business end of a creative enterprise. Always will.
That's cool, and that's another good thing to share because having not been there myself,
Yeah.
I didn't. I had no visibility into what you just said, the paperwork side of things.
Yeah.
Not to encapsulate it that way, but yeah, the budgeting paperwork,
Oh, my
the
friends that are still there, and they're who have been working, kind of through the recession, and there were severe cutbacks. They spend the vast majority of their day doing presentation decks to whatever stakeholder group, is clamoring for it. So it's less about creating than it is about kind of, merchandising the
communicating.
process. Yeah.
Mm. Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah. Then that's funny. Yeah. Then like you kind of think like an MBA might be valuable to those people. I always so that kind of
Yeah, if that comes with like a PowerPoint skill degree, yes, that's exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah,
That yeah.
and don't
Okay.
get fancy with any of those other programs, or anything like that, because then nobody can use them, and you'll have to redo the deck anyway.
Yeah, we can't use Keynote yet. That's
No, you
still
don't
too
even.
new.
Yeah, no, no, no.
Yeah, I'm always extra tough on MBAs, and I don't really mean it, but in my experience, I always pretend that all they do is make decks all day, and and so to hear that, okay, there's a lot of people even on the kind of the creative side of
Yeah.
like a big hotel company doing that. That's
My favorite phrase
ba-
about that, just to take a little digression,
of
is
course.
how like there's always like a circle or something like that with all sorts of arrows in it, and things. That's kind of the key visual.
Yeah.
Someone once likened it to a crop circle, like in a farm, but they called it a crap circle. And it's like I always loved that one. That was
Oh, the
one,
crab circle
the
slide
crap
has
circle.
made an
Yeah, it was
appearance.
one of my favorites. Yeah, had to be created by aliens, of course.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, as a kid, I will say, I was a kid. I don't know how long crop circles were a thing, but when I was a kid, they were a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And I remember hearing about them on the news every once in a while and thinking, wow, like this is one of life's mysteries. And boy,
Hmm.
did that just go away. We kind of just said, nope, they were people,
Comes
messing with
back in
everybody.
every third presentation you're going to see. Yeah,
Yeah, they went out of the farms and
yeah.
into our decks. Um,
That's right. From the farms to the cube farm. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oof. Well, that's cool. But you got to work on probably two of the best hotel brands out there,
Yep.
hospitality brands,
Yep.
right? And before that you said it's incestuous and it all ties together. Before that, that's kind of what Team One's specialty was too, right? Like luxury, really
Yeah.
high end, really particularly awesome brands, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
cool.
you get spoiled real fast. I mean, the Ritz-Carlton, I could, go on for an entire episode about that. But the amount of stories within that brand that we had to work with, you talk about content, Content-a-palooza. It was unbelievable. They
Oh yeah.
have this concept called wow stories within the brand, which are exceptional guest experiences, and their associates, their employees, their ladies and gentlemen, as they call them, would mark them down and things like that, and they would compile them. And I think at last count, they were like 40,000 of these types of stories, and sometimes they
Yep.
were huge, big things that they did. And sometimes they were really very small. But again, you just talk about within the brand, look at all this stuff we have to work with. So we got spoiled quickly there.
Yeah, I have the same feeling having been on the agency side working with that team.
Yeah.
Do you remember? It's one of the 30,000, so maybe not. But do you remember the Joshi the giraffe story?
Josh, you did the giraffe. That's exactly right.
Where there,
And I think you actually, that is the actual name. At some point, the story was retold, and the name of the stuffed animal was changed to protect the innocent. Don't know
uh,
why, but actually, the father, the dad of the dad of the kid who lost it was actually somebody in the industry, and like filed the story online and did a video of him telling it firsthand.
I remember
And
that story
yeah,
still gets told. Like when we're at drinks with people in the industry,
yeah,
that story is still being told today, and that's been what 10 years or something. Yes, for
yeah.
anyone.
And I've
Yeah, I was
seen a
just
couple of other brands tell the same story. It's just like, where'd you get that one from? But there are ones
well,
that are just, even more amazing. There was one about a guest who was at a beach resort who was in a wheelchair and was looking out, to the ocean, to the coast. And they were like, boy, I would love nothing better than to put my feet in that water. And wouldn't you know it, over somebody on, one of the folks at the hotel heard it, and wouldn't you know, overnight the engineering department built a wooden dock from the hotel out to the water's edge so they could go down and
That's so good. I hadn't heard that one. That's really good.
and these things, it's just one after another, and I actually
Yeah.
have an entire presentation of them where I use them to punctuate each chapter, and it's like I can't get through the presentation without choking up because it's just amazing what people will do. And it's like, if you ever want your faith in humanity restored, listen to a couple of wow stories.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think they're literally one of the best companies on earth at that. I think this I even have my own little version. My business
Yeah.
partner Matt was at forgot which property, somewhere in California, I think, one of the Ritz-Carltons, and there was a beach event or something, and he was
Hmm.
talking. There was a guy rolling cigars, custom cigars,
Yeah.
and um, and he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
to
That's right, Matt. Cigars. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
yeah, a guy running
Yeah.
cigars.
Hmm.
And so he was talking, to people, and the guy offered him one. He said, "Oh no, I don't smoke, but my business partner loves cigars," meaning
Yeah.
me. And moved on, had the rest of his evening, and then when he got to his room, a alligator leather two cigar holder,
Yeah.
two fresh hand rolled cigars with a cigar cutter was on his pillow for your business partner.
Hmm.
Without him even, just in passing, someone heard him say that. And
Yeah.
I benefited. And I'm back here in Boston, not on the beach, in a cubicle. And that impacted me, from a word of mouth
Yeah.
branding marketing perspective. That, I've
Yeah.
told that story 20 times easily in the past 10 years. And,
Yeah.
it just took them noticing one little thing and taking one little action. And it's crazy.
For, and especially, for someone who wasn't even a guest,
Right. Exactly.
someone who's 3,000 miles away, we're going to make their day really special. So,
Or it's a cool insight because even though they were making my, gift for me,
yeah.
they made Matt look really good, right? So they made the guest look exceptional, right?
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
they they they, they made us both happy with
Yeah.
one move.
Yeah. It's not
And
only,
then I've told that to 50 other people.
we care about you and we care about the people you care about. And it's just like magic time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like having been there and being on the agency side first, and then
Hmm.
at those brands, I feel like you can take that with you. Like that's not proprietary. Caring about the customer and caring about the client and their customers is
Yeah.
something that obviously I don't know if anyone. You have to build your organization around that to be that committed to it. That
Yeah.
they're way on the end of the spectrum. On the very bleeding edge
Yeah.
of being the most, um, friendly in that regard, thoughtful.
Yeah.
But I would feel like you could probably, at your current place, you can tell those same stories and kind of imbue a little bit of that, probably
That's
with a
right.
lot of your
That's right.
clients, right?
You can. I mean, the thing with Ritz-Carlton was that type of gesture, those types of acts. You didn't get a sense for how much discipline was behind them,
Yeah.
and yes, the hiring people the right way. I mean, it's kind of like a Disney-like thing in terms of making sure that, you've got the right personality type, but also the daily sessions that they had to reinforce the culture, to reinforce these principles, to share those types of stories as a motivator for others. They even had general managers who kind of forced the point and would say, hey, I want you to have 4 extraordinary interactions per guest per stay, type of thing.
Whoa.
So yeah, and again, it's that discipline behind it that makes all of that possible. So, yeah, you can sprinkle those in, but we're always careful to say, it's more than just the Ritz-Carlton pocket card that everybody carried around. It's, a lot of work behind it.
That's cool. So this has been really awesome. I think it's super valuable for people to hear all these little stories. I guess one final question. Um, the audience here is globally diverse. They're all over. They're at different points in their career. Some of them are creative. Some of them are on the client side. Some of them are even like technologists like myself working with creatives.
Hmm.
I'd love to, if you have any advice getting started. You've been on both sides. You've been at big companies and small companies. I feel like you've
Yeah.
got a cool vantage point to comment. Like, if you were starting over today, what would you do to make sure you have a good time and are successful and get have a good go of it if you were kind of starting off?
Yeah. Um, you know, I'm not a big no regrets guy because I've got pages of them. I'm a Catholic middle child, um, but I don't mind the way I did it, which was to start in smaller environments where I can get a sense of all the pieces, and all the departments and how it all works, and figure out if this is what I want to do. So to me, it's like if you think you want to do it, get in wherever you can. Maybe in a smaller environment where you can get access to more, you can see a little bit more, and figure out, A, do I really like the business? And then B, what part of the business, do I really, want to dig into, more here? Because there are so many different types of tracks. And even with strategy departments, you've got people that lean into kind of pure market research. You've got people who are real great at kind of unearthing uh, insights in consumers that can lead to a big, idea. You've got people who can build great message architectures and brand platforms and things like that. So there's so many different flavors even within, what we think of as single disciplines and departments. But get in there and then also study up, to the extent that you can. Look at find agencies that you admire and track their work and track the clients that they work for and figure out why. Because invariably somebody like me will sit across from the table from you and say, whose work out there do you really admire? And you'll be amazed at how many people aren't able to answer that question. For a
I
business
admire
that
where
they
I can
work
get a
in
paycheck.
for a
Yeah.
career. Yeah, yeah. Well, I admire the work at this agency I'm interviewing at. Type of thing. So if you're going to be in it, type of thing. Um,
I love
so
that. I think
that, and then again, you can, there is life, after agency with the client and after client with the agency. I mean, you can move, back and forth. Nothing to be scared of. And there's good things on both sides. But find out what you want to do. And then
that's a
and move around.
I
It's hospitality business is great for mobility. So's our business.
yeah, I think that's a really good. I would never have said, start an agency or start on the client side or whatever, but actually using your framework, perhaps agency gets you the most exposure the fastest and gets
I think
you
so. I
that way
think
you
so.
kind of quickly can answer that question, exactly what do I want to be doing with my time. So that's cool. So not to we wouldn't want to prescribe the same playbook for everybody, but
Yeah.
perhaps it's you know gather as much data as you can on the space, get as much experience as you can, taste as many different things, understand as many different things. That way you can more quickly find your niche or what you really
Yeah.
like. And I
Yeah.
think that second point you made is really cool because I, until you said it, I hadn't really thought of it. It seems like I think I had the impression that you really can't bounce back and forth too much between agencies and brands. But per your point, like actually now you've done it clearly, and now a lot of my now I'm kind of thinking through a lot of my friends. Like I think they've all done it at least once or twice, back and forth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
seems like
No,
yeah,
there
there
are
really
a
isn't a
lot of
thick
things that
line there.
parallel. The other bit of advice I would say is, there's this whole thing about growing your network and trying to add, 1.5 million followers on LinkedIn, but it's like find, a core group of partners that you really love working with that you think are really smarter than you, and stick with them and trust them, because that was, a relationship with Matt, that I've enjoyed over the years, where it's like, this is a person who doesn't think the way I do, has access to knowledge and things, then, technology that I don't have. They can take me further. I've got a great creative partner for years and a guy named Adam Day Lewin, who's over at Hearst Publications in London. And he and I have collaborated on a few different things. And those have been
The stay
extremely,
perhaps was that
yeah, the stay, that was it. It was like,
that's awesome.
and it was funny talking about things coming full circle. I just noticed the other day, Adobe and Netflix are doing this campaign called The Great Untold, where they're out there looking for filmmakers and stories that need to be told. And it's like, It sounds kind of familiar to what we did a couple of years ago. Not, it's and what it's just I think validation of that's an interesting strategy to give voice to people who deserve it, But we also did we took those wow stories that I mentioned before and did this crazy interactive, experience with music and lighting and film and food and beverage, and tried to take those stories and present them in a whole different way. So you find partners like that, and he's one too. I'll give you another one. There's an age old. If you go back to the Mad Men show, and people sketching out ideas on cocktail napkins, that's a true story for me. That's how the stay got started. We were in London at a bar, and over drinks, we actually sketched out that idea, and 2 years later, it came to fruition. So,
and you passed it through a vent to each
the,
other.
that's it. Yeah, well, that's getting into the first movie, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
The actually, I really for anyone who's listening who has not seen the videos, this short video series called The Stay, created by you while you were at Marriott.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm trying to remember the name, Encore, I believe is one of the
Encore, that
videos.
was the one down in Grand Cayman. Yeah,
That's right. That is
yeah.
actually one of my favorites. So if I'm allowed to make a recommendation, I think you're supposed to watch them all, right? But if you only have 11 minutes or however long it was, go watch Encore from the stay. I thought it was better than a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah.
It felt like a Black Mirror-y vibe,
Same kind of vibe. That's exactly right.
but
And the
yeah,
actor in
really
that is a
awesome.
guy named Fares, who was in Zero Dark 30, and we just caught him
Uh,
between gigs, and it was like, and he's like, "What? Go down to Grand Cayman for a week and shoot a film? Sure, that sounds good to me." But
Yeah. Also,
yeah,
if you ever need anyone to
yeah,
go to the tropics and shoot a film,
yeah.
I'm available. Let me know.
I'll keep you on the list, for sure, so Matt can get more hand rolled cigars. Um, but for my money, I'll add is I like the one we shot in Hong Kong called Strangers Reunion. And
Strangers
it came
Reunion.
up again, and I actually watched it for the first time in a while because of Asian American Pacific Islander violence, the stuff that was going on, and it made me reflect on that story and the fact that we as a global brand, we gave voice to the story, and we shot a film that was 60% in Korean. So I think something for a largely American brand to do was kind of neat and something I'm very proud of. It was left unresolved. It was a very emotional story. It wasn't just shiny happy people, but very powerful, and won an arm's length of awards in true short film competitions, not branded content competitions.
Right. Yeah. Not just marketing and
Yeah,
advertising, but
yeah.
also
No,
short
we were
film.
telling a real, authentic story.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm glad we touched on that this day. People should check that out when they get a chance. It's still all over.
Ritz-Carlton.com, The Stay. I think you can still find it there.
There you go. I love it.
Plug to my old friends. Yeah, shout out.
That's awesome. Well, really amazing to have you on, man. These stories are awesome. And I think everyone can benefit from hearing these things, checking out the stay, just kind of bouncing these new ideas in their head. I would say anytime you want, you're welcome back on the podcast. We're going to be releasing these more and more frequently. So anytime you have something else to share with the audience, I'm sure they'd love to have you. And it was great having you on.
Great, Brendan. Thank you so much. I love talking about this, and hope your audience gets something out of it. So thank you so much for your time.
No, they will. Thanks. Hi. If you enjoyed this podcast, if you like creativity and things like that, you might love the International Advertising Association. They've been around since 1938 and currently act as the global compass for the world's creatives. It's one of the most influential and well-connected groups for marketing and advertising and creative professionals. I suggest you check them out at iaaglobal.org and perhaps become a member.